evening. Welcome to JMuse Café. I'm Michael Srokia. I'm with the JMuse Café committee. I want to thank you guys for coming down this evening. We have a great program for you. And to get things started, I want to say two things by way of introduction here. One is a little history about the JMuse Café program, because it's connected to food, which is why we're here. And I hope you got some. There's a little bit left, so feel free also to get up at any point and help yourself to some more beverage or food. But the history is we began in 2011, and with the idea that we wanted to do programming in the library that would bring together all facets, not only of the campus, but try to also get the community as well, to forums where you can have discussions with each other, whether you be faculty, staff, community member, student. And one of the ways we thought to do that is to create this casual atmosphere and to kind of break down these artificial barriers, perhaps, that sometimes stand in the way of conversations. And food is a way to do that, to sit down with someone, have a meal with someone. Now, these aren't meals, but at other events that we've had too, we'll have tables around and we'll have discussions, and we usually have food there to kind of help, I think, put people at ease and share something together. So that was a central point, and I think that speaks a little bit to the power of food has in the way we interact with each other. The second thing I want to say has to do with the title of the event. It's called The Menu, and as we were kind of putting this together, I was thinking how when we go out to eat, often, not always, but often, before we actually get our meals or get digging into our plates, we have an encounter with the text. We have a menu. We open it up sometimes, we flip it over, and you might say the menu is a genre unto itself, right? Certain places do it better than other places. And it kind of orients you toward the meal, and it may change your mind and shift how you feel about the meal you're about to have. It also gives you a point of reference to talk to others. What are you getting? Oh, I'm getting this. And so you have this exchange over this text, over these words. So tonight, I'm delighted to have some wordsmiths here and hear the words of others and their thoughts on food and its various roles in our life. And we have a variety of writers to kind of offer that to you. So what I will do is introduce them as they come up and read for you. And we're going to kick things off with David Brennan. David Brennan is the author of the forthcoming book, Murder Ballads, a work of creative criticism, as well as the poetry collections, The Family Flamboyant and The White Visitation. A warm slice of bread drizzled with olive oil and topped with sliced tomato and basil, fresh from the garden, may be his favorite food in the world. He teaches writing at JMU, so please welcome David up here.
Thanks, Michael. Can you hear me all right if I don't put it up? Excellent. Great. I'm just going to jump right in here since we are on a tight schedule, and I know we have a lot of readers to get through. To start off, I have a few prose poems to share. This first one is called Anecdote of the Twice-Stuffed Moose. The moose noses open the refrigerator, gorges on pickles and raw meat, beer and condiments. Inside the refrigerator hangs a picture of another well-stocked refrigerator. The moose eats it as well, stuffed. Stretched taut, the stitched seam holding together the moose's stomach pops, and onto the floor spill his animating innards, all violence and tomorrows. A picture of a forest stream, clear and deep. A picture of a field in fog, and in the fog the outline of a moose, himself. He strikes at the pictures with his hooves, smashing the glass, puncturing the paper, cracking the frames, the certainty of the hunter. Spent, the moose collapses, strikes his head on the kitchen counter, jars loose from its socket a glass eyeball, Spinning beneath the refrigerator, the eyeball knows at once it will be comfortable here in this new, so familiar darkness. The cloud. The snap. This next poem doesn't really have a title, but I think for tonight we might call it An Invitation to Dine, given the theme. A can of fake flowers atop the bookshelf. She tickles their petals, tulips and carnations, a trio of blood-red roses. The fabric of her summer dress, a floral print. The room's wallpaper, a burst of yellow, purple, orange mums. Selecting a tulip from the can, she peels a petal from the stem and places it on her tongue. The threaded plastic fabric cool and slick in her mouth. She chews and swallows. Polishing off the tulip, she tries a carnation, then a rose. The carnation bitter, the rose sweet. Pulling a book from the shelf, she opens it at the middle, deep creases the spine. She draws feathers on the pages, holds it aloft, and with a gentle push, sends the open book into the air. It falls, then with a flap, finds its wings and begins to chart a holding pattern around the room's periphery. Soon an entire shelf of books is beating around the room, the crackle of fluttering paper like muffled electricity, the agile paperbacks darting in and around the lumbering flight paths of the hardcovers. She throws a fake carnation to the center of the room and the books dive for it, jabbing, clawing, frenzied to feed. Within seconds, the flower devoured, her breath heavy. She tosses a second flower, a third, and with each crush of book feels her dress tighten. Fabric chafing skin, the can soon empty. Dropping her dress to the floor, she strides to the center of the room, the books orbiting, eyeing her, uncertain, eager. She scratches at her chest, draws out a fine thread of blood, smears it on her stomach, on her face, opens wide her arms. Come, she says. 3 meditations. I was once shown 2 forks and a piece of cake sitting on a cement ledge. Pictures of an abandoned celebration. From the ledge could be seen the Susquehanna, a parking lot dotted with delivery trucks, hints of Green Mountain behind glass buildings. A yellow smiley face sticker stuck to the cement, scratched at. I was once shown 2 forks. One of the forks for me, but no food on the table. Give me your hand, she said, sliding her fingers over mine, flattening my knuckles to the wood. I thought, fortune teller. Tines flashing, she drove her fork into the flesh of my palm. The heat like a bonfire ringed and battered by drums. Her palm bared on the table, my upper lip beaded with sweat. She pointed to my fork. Your turn. I was once shown 2 forks and a piece of cake. Night and down the alleyway, red lanterns lilting outside the noodle shops. I stripped off the plastic sheath protecting the cake. She was on the pill and loved the Beatles more than her dog. The waitress delivered our coffee. I poured far too much cream in mine. The sugar bowl empty. And I have one more poem to read. It is a slightly longer poem composed of 10 short parts. Sonnets of a sort, unrhymed sonnets. Self-reproof. Please take care of me, David. I've read all the magazines. My flesh is sad. Really, my current status is very embarrassing. But what is for breakfast? Hominy soaked in maple syrup and squared with butter? Sweet potato souffle populated with specks of jalapeno? In the morning, as I sit by the window absently inhaling coffee, when I see your hard eyebrows scrunched together emerge from the kitchen, tray in your hands, my shell goes empty. Not broken, not cracked, empty. The flesh, flat flower, sheds a tear. What is it, you ask? Is something wrong? Feed me, David, then I will know. You'll always be the same while I get old and grumpy. I'm already old and grumpy. A shady day is depressing enough without shady thoughts. How can there be a man who doesn't even move his fingers? You had everything. You had a piano. You had a house and a friend. You had a mouth that loved food. Thank you for being alive. I'm crying because I'm so happy is a lie. For the sun to own a shadow, it must have a sister who is brighter and fiercer. I have a sister in my heart, the dark and fiery girl. There are people you are happy just knowing they're alive. This is how we survive, since we can't die. You don't gain weight because you talk too much, David, just like a skinny donkey always braying. I was never satisfied with a bed for sleep and food for the table. You told me your children become your enemies. You are the biggest idiot on this earth. I already have enough people at my throat. Would I be happy knowing my child lived, even if I never saw her infant limbs or put her to bed with a story? There is not enough toothpaste on this planet to remove the heat from that burn. The missing, if you just pretend that you have moved on, does it let you? My hand, are you going to hold it again? Looks like I'm dumber than you think. Wanting you to cling to me like I am an economic power and you the poorest of nations, seeking forgiveness for your debts. You left a platter of fish under the chin of a cat the first time you took my hungry digits in your calloused palm. What an attractive man, I thought. I have hardly any memory of the man who thought that. When I try to find him, all I see are yellow flowers shaking, as if we were playing hide and seek in a barley field. I'll just stay here, always at the same place. Now I am too tall to hide anywhere. I can still remember the house and the big yard and you holding my hair, my feet in those yellow all-stars. My feet in those shoes were friends. Don't you know anything about being sentimental? I've kept my hair long so I could feel your fingers running through and out of its blackness. Pain is still pain in dreamland. Now I am too tall and always right here. You yanked me to the ground by my hair. Whatever a man can do for a man, you bet he can make it hurt. The good things, the bad things, they all go away. That's not how I plan on living. Pour me a glass of red paired with a plate of garlic angel hair, and I'll tell you a story or two. Not right now. No, if I talk too much, it will seem that time has touched only me. I'm not a dog wagging her tail 10 minutes after a tongue lashing. While I'm alive, nothing is over. Do I look like I'm deceiving you? That's because I'm hungry. A side of olives, calamata, or roasted red peppers. What time is dinner? For now, I will tell you this. All of it was my fault. Most of it. Split it 50-50. We carried out our dirty deeds as easily as we ate our meals. Happiness, what is it? The day's tiredness fading. For that silly feeling, you want to ruin my memories? Even a worm squirms when stepped on. Remember when I yelled at you? Don't be good to me anymore. I'll keep feeling bad for you. For the day you have to eat that fast food, the day you have to drink that supplemental fiber. Always the chorus, never the solo. Wearing shoes that hurt your feet. They say, if you feel bad, just get better. Live comfortably and raise fruit. I miss drinking even while I'm drinking. It is worth almost dying to be orphaned by the scotch in its tall vessel. A bottle of scotch is so like the body, glass the fragile anatomy, liquid the unpredictable personality, the soul that burns a different brand on every tongue. One must mourn the final glass as a death, the death of a parent even. I am my father's executioner. I have blood but no tears, a mouth but I never smile. Still, there are things that make me feel alive, like kissing a dead body on the lips. That's why people are so frightening. You can't look inside of them. You raise the hammer to strike temple or breastbone or pelvis, to crack open the body's form, but finally you flake out of the swing. They say tenderness is a disease too. You shouldn't hit anyone with a flower. A hammer hurts, but a flower will shatter a body. David, you've never looked as scary as you do now, arranging flowers in a vase at my bedside. Black-eyed Susans, lilacs, a soul-white tulip. That you must feed someone to become. That you must be fed by someone to become. David, have you heard the gossip in the bars and churches? The bartenders pouring whiskeys and the pastors pouring pity? They say in the game of poker, when a pro and a beginner meet, it's everyone else who loses. And whoever cashes out laughs. Am I making sense to you? I've gotten this far from the fire I was chosen to burn in. I am just beginning to cool down. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Our next reader is Erica Cavanagh. She graduated from James Madison University with a BA in English and Art History. She served 2 years in the Peace Corps in Benin with West Africa, where she worked with women and children on health and access to education and economic resources. She holds an MA in Humanities from the University of Chicago and an MFA in Nonfiction Writing at the University of Iowa, where she was an Iowa Arts Fellow. She is the recipient of the Missouri Review's Editor's Prize, the University of Chicago's Ruth Murray Prize, and a Pushcart nomination. Her nonfiction has appeared or is forthcoming in the Missouri Review, North American Review, Bellevue Literary Review, Gastronomica, What's Cooking Mom, narratives about food and family, Off Assignment, Contrapasso, and elsewhere. She is a slow writer and teaches nonfiction workshops, African American literature, and food studies at JMU. Please welcome Erica.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for coming. Tonight, I am going to read 2 pieces that are set in Benin, West Africa, where I served as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years. Those of you who've heard me read before, you might be wondering, don't you read anything other than stuff about Benin? I do. I occasionally write about my grandma, but I'm not going to read about my grandmother tonight. It's good to know a few things about Benin before I start reading, just so that you can feel a little bit oriented. Benin is located between Nigeria and Togo on the west coast. And it's about 7 degrees north of the equator, so it's really hot. Another thing to know is that it's a former French colony, and you'll hear some of that French, peppering a couple of my pieces. But another thing to know about, former French colony or any of these former colonies where the colonial language might be the official language, still in that place, or at least I could say in Benin, there are 50 other languages spoken. And later you'll hear a little bit of Bariba, which is one of the languages that I learned to speak there. Okay. One more thing to know about this piece that I'm about to read, which is called Come and Eat, is that one of the ways that people knock on a door in Benin is that occasionally they do actually knock on the door, but so often, because it's so hot and there isn't air conditioning in many places, people leave their doors open, so there's nothing to knock on, and so instead people go, "Co, co, co," and that's the way they announce that they're there. So you'll hear that in this piece. Okay. At roadside stands for beans and rice and pounded yams, patrons held up their bowls. "Come and eat," they called. "Come and eat," called the Tanti, frying up dough. But I just wave, say thank you, and keep walking. When I got home, my neighbor, Madame Sotinjo, was seated on her terrace, cracking peanut shells against the ground and punting the nuts into her basin. We politely said hello. Her children were at school and her husband at the cotton factory. That much I knew. We shared a well, a yard, and an outhouse. I'd just moved in, and assumed we'd be cordial, but otherwise keep to ourselves. In the early evening, I'd be reading or getting ready for dinner, when suddenly I'd hear Mr. Sotenjo come home on his putt-putt scooter, rounding into the gate as he'd sound his ducky horn with a cartoonish quack. A commotion of giggles flew out of the yard and drew me to the window to watch as all 5 of his children clung to his arms and he teased them. I felt a caged joy right in my sternum. What was it like to fly out to your own father like that, without fear of being a bother? One night, as I was reading by my lantern, a small voice called from outside, "Co, co, co." I got up and padded across the floor, and there, on the other side of the door, was 6-year-old Chantal. "This is from Mama," she said, holding up a small lidded casserole. She tried to be so composed, but looked so blushy and wound up that I couldn't help but make a grand show of thanking her as she squirmed and tried to hide her bright face. So I curtsied, and she curtsied, and then she sprang into the dark, calling, "Mama!" And so the casseroles began. They came in Chantal's hands, they came in her brother's. Sometimes they came together, standing side by side, holding casseroles like cupped prayers. Under those lids were maize meal and savory sauces, yam fries, and the occasional guinea fowl, one day squawking about the yard, the next a roasted drumstick. That I was a vegetarian mattered less and less. The Sotenjos liked my pancakes. When the rains returned and the land sprouted green again, Mama and I made over 100 pancakes on my 2-burner propane stove for their niece's first communion. Gâteaux, they called them, cakes. The celebrants ate them plain, not with honey like me. The West African diet tends to be starchy, maize, millet, sorghum, and yams, served with sauces hot enough to make your head sweat and your hands grab for water. Not many sweets. A discovery I made when only months into my 2-year service I attempted to feed honeyed pancakes to a carpenter who just installed my ceiling. After a few reluctant bites, he put the dish down. "Madame, they're too sweet," he said gravely. Peace Corps volunteers commonly ask, "What's the first thing you'll eat when you get back?" In Benin, I dreamed of ice cream, wrote odes to creamy sweets, and when I pictured the day I would sit with a spoon poised over a mound of whipped cream, Arias soared. My reunion with ice cream would be nothing less than ecstasy. And then the day came. During the layover on my return to the United States, I wandered Charles de Gaulle in a sleepy fog. It was only 6 in the morning, the airport nearly deserted, and then I spotted a Haagen-Dazs. My heart swelled, the angels sang. I bolted towards the storefront and scanned the glass. 10, they'd open at 10. I'd still be here, oh the amens. Ice cream, rays of blessing were shining upon me. And yet, I appeared perfectly calm, hands at my sides, head held straight. I turned and found a seat at the nearby gate where I read my book like a nun, not some lusty wolf clawing at the entrance for dulce de leche. When the hour of glory arrived and the door to Haagen-Dazs opened, I did not move immediately. I did not beeline for the entrance, clapping my hands giddily. I circled. Circling calmed me, as did the performance of patience and handling hunger as if I had no hunger at all. I looped through the crowded gates, and when I returned, it was as though I just happened to be passing by the Haagen-Dazs when it dawned on me that ice cream could be a wholesome breakfast. And the line of customers suggested others thought so too. I gaped at the tubs behind the glass, pistachio, vanilla bean, double cream, coffee, chocolate chip. When my turn came, I ordered dulce de leche and coffee topped in hot fudge, marshmallow, and peanut butter cups. My spirits were jacked. Deaf sundae in hand, I strolled to the nearest, least crowded seats and huddled the dish close to me, together at last. I thought I knew the way to bliss. I thought ice cream could be a kind of homecoming, clearing a path back to what I loved. The first bite came as a punch, the hot fudge so intense my lips pursed. I dug in again. I'd adjust, I thought. But the second bite was just as cloying. I hovered over the bowl and dipped the spoon in, cautiously skimming the surface, and tried again, slowly moving the flavors around my mouth as I looked out at the halls, travelers striding by with rolling suitcases. Everyone in suits seemed to know where they were going. Within spoonfuls, I put the bowl down and gazed at the murky mass in my lap, wondering what happened to us. Meanwhile, the ice cream was melting. I looked around. An American mother and daughter were chatting nearby, something about someone's dress. Over and over, I could hear myself turning to them and saying, "Would you like the rest of my sundae?" I couldn't bear to throw it away. But whenever I moved to speak, my throat tightened as I imagined their discomfort or their concern, and I could bear that even less. I wasn't ready to see from their eyes that I was already lost. Over those first months back, I would sit on my bed each morning, a mattress on the floor at my father's house. Get up, I'd tell myself. Get up. The light in my window was overcast as I stared at the overcast light in the window, and I would wonder what for. I turned to cooking. At night, I made soup and savory pies for my divorced father and teenage sister, who often didn't eat together. The house was tense. So I washed the dishes, listening to the hum of water, and when I was done, I'd put away the leftovers with an ache. All I wanted to do was go next door with a covered dish. "We thought you might like some," I'd say. But we didn't know our neighbors not well, and I didn't want to disturb them. I missed the Sochinjos terribly. I missed Mama and Papa and the children. I missed neighbors who sat outdoors and walked through neighborhoods saying, "Hello, come and eat." These were the habits of love from another world. This was the grace my neighbors taught me. So this one really isn't about food, although I mentioned cheese once. It's more really about hunger. This one also set in Benin. I actually read this at a reading last month, but it was the first time I read it, and I'm always horribly nervous the first time I read something. And then I tell myself, okay, so then you have to read it again, because you have to get over your nervousness. So this piece, I'll just tell you a couple of things about it. It came out of an assignment, really, that a friend of mine gave me, a fellow writer, who said, write a letter. And, of course, there's a long tradition of writing epistolaries, writing letters as a literary form. So I tried it out. And this letter is named for the person to whom, it's addressed, whom I'm addressing. And that person's name is Idrisu. And he is someone who I met. You'll get this through the letter, but I've been thinking about, as I read this last time and as I'm reading this tonight, that it was 18 years ago, right at this time, that I was about the age of some of my college students in here, and I was in training for Peace Corps, and I met this person there. 2 words to know here. One, you'll hear perhaps a familiar French word, the word marché, which is the word for market. The other word that I think is probably important to know, because it's right in the first paragraph, and if you hear it, you don't know it. And I wouldn't expect you to know it. It might throw you off. And that's the word zemi. And zemi is the word for, You know, not many people have cars in Benin, and in the cities, people really need to get around. And so what they haven't said are these moto taxis, which are basically you get on the back of a scooter, a motorcycle, or a moped. And the guy, and it's always a guy, it's not a woman, driving the moped is wearing a yellow shirt, and that's how you know he's a taxi. So you'll hear that, Zemi and Marche. Okay, Idrisu. You were the person I couldn't stop seeing in Parakou. It was your hometown. I'd be riding on the back of a Zemi and think I saw you in your blue button-down, passing around the corner on your red scooter. I saw you at Marché buying new shoes and by the round point where a woman sold Wagasse cheese, my hand jerking up to wave at you. Did I say I would write when I left? If I did and failed, I am sorry. I failed to find a French translation of Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea for you. I kept wanting to send you that. From our talks on the veranda, I thought you might like it, but my bookstore in the US said they couldn't get one. The internet is more connected now, as is said. It's supposed to be able to find things, and people too. Still, when I had the chance, I didn't try hard enough to find what I wanted to for you. Eureka, I found you, you used to say, playing on the sound of my name. You were my teacher. For 10 weeks, you helped train me and 14 fellow Americans for a life in Benin. For 10 years, I've taught Americans who are not much younger than we were when we came to your country. Some of them so open, so brave, so willing to risk, while others take things for granted and expect more than they give. I hope we thanked you. I hope I thanked you. I think about our talks on the Gounod's veranda. When I saw the Gounod's that first time I came back in 2002, they asked if I knew you were dead. I did. I'd gotten the news in a mass email, which seemed wrong, but that's how it goes now. The Gounod's remembered how respectful you were when you visited me during that short time I lived with them in '97, how you'd always go around back and say hello to Mama before coming around to the front again to join me and the children who were always playing some game in the shade. In the beginning, I thought you were coming over to help me improve my French. We'd talk about the books we knew in common, The Dark Child, The Stranger, Candide. Neither of us cared for The Stranger much, though I liked Sartre's plays and tried to tell you their names, but didn't know the French translations for No Exit or The Respectful Prostitute. Sometimes my side of the conversation was like playing the game. I'm thinking of a word, my mind reaching and reaching for the French words that escaped me. Meanwhile, you often spoke with your hands, the top of your index finger bent inward from a machine accident when you were a boy. I confessed I had not joined the Peace Corps because I thought I could fix anything. I had come to Benin to make friends, to watch, listen, care, and learn something different. You had a 12-year-old daughter, or was she 10? It seemed too personal to ask. We joked a lot instead. I can still hear you teasing me with that famous quote from Candide. Oh, but you live in the best of all possible worlds. Oh no, I teased back, you live in the best of all possible worlds. We made this the punchline for a host of absurdities. The bribes paid to traffic guards in Benin, the media spectacle over Bill Clinton's indiscretions in the US, and entire villages burned in Nigeria so Shell Oil could take land and drill. I think you were 32 then. You had a deep-throated, sincere laugh. Sometimes when you looked at me, your eyes were so full of intent, I could feel it right in my sternum and had to look off towards the neighboring maize field, the leafy stalks bathing in dusky light. I want to know you, you once said to me. and the heat rose up my spine. I want to see you, you said, in case I had missed your first statement. Do you understand? I did understand, but pretended I didn't get it. I felt so wound up around you, I didn't know what to do, but waited out until the end of training, when I would be shipped off to a faraway village where I would rarely see you. I haven't known how to explain this, only that I needed to get to know you more slowly. I needed to know the language better and not be so new to Benin. No one is guarded or unguarded for no reason. There is a game in the United States called tag, and this game teaches you that a touch can freeze you and another kind of touch can unfreeze you. Where I come from, girls are sometimes treated like a game. Like that time 2 boys I knew pulled me away from a party where music was playing and I was dancing, feeling free. You're gonna like this, this'll be fun, they kept saying, gripping my arm. And then they pinned me to the ground. That taught me not to trust myself or anyone else. Remember that time you were walking me home when thunderheads amassed on the horizon? The heat was heavy, pressing down, just as the sky boomed and darkened. We thought we had time to get to our homes, but then the wind picked up and the clouds rolled in fast. We could hear the rain rushing towards us like a swift-footed army, which is when we looked at each other and without saying anything took off running towards the house. The deluge hit and soused us instantly. The front door was locked in the rain so loud that no one could hear our knocks. I only had a key for my bedroom, a room separate from the rest of the house. I wasn't thinking I shouldn't be alone in my room with a man. I was thinking we needed shelter. The room was tiny. A desk, a wooden chair, and a mattress on the floor were the only furnishings, remember? And there was my mosquito net hanging over the bed. We dripped on the concrete floor, trying to dry off with my one towel as rain throttled the roof. A thrilling cavalcade threatening to break in. And there you sat on the chair, and I on the edge of the mattress, looking up at you and trying to seem so casual as you looked at me plaintively and seemed shy suddenly, looking away at your hands. Toward the end of training, when you started teaching us Bariba, your mother tongue, I sensed I would miss your voice and your hands. I remember you teaching us the word for God, Gusano, and the many Bariba blessings that begin with that word. You taught us God despite your doubts that one even existed. When I am away from Benin, I miss the sounds. Do you miss the sounds? When I came back, I stayed for 2 months and had to write down all the sounds in my journal as if I could keep them. Like the first night I arrived, I heard a storm in the distance and thought about Go Yiru, the Bariba celebration for the dead, how every night during the month-long celebration calabashes are played, huge calabashes played in lantern light by the open hands of old women. The gift offered up to the dead is sound, so sound is what I must give you now. I'm surrounded by mosquito netting on a full-frame bed. The swollen air knows the rain is coming. Taxi motos buzz by, then the heavier, trundling sound of 4-wheeled vehicles on uneven roads. The curtains made of someone's old sheets waft, 3 panels of them blousing off of the glass louvered windows like softly repelling breath. The ceiling fan whirs, but I'm turning it off so I can hear the storm coming, and it does come, the throw and toss and sway of wind in the palm trees, and how the palm leaves hitting each other sound like the spray of dashing waves. In the distance, thunder growls like a waking giant. In this darkness, lights flash. That rainy season, I learned another Bariba blessing. Akanim Ndosi Idrisu, may you dream in water.
Thank you, Erica. So we started with the poetry of David Brennan. We had the prose, Erica Cavanagh's nonfiction. Now we turn to the stories of Chad Gusler. Chad is an assistant professor in the Language and Literature Department at Eastern Mennonite University. He received his BS in Biblical Studies and Theology from Eastern Mennonite College. In '98, he received an MA in Religion from Eastern Mennonite Seminary, and in 2007, his MFA in Creative Writing and Fiction from Seattle Pacific University in Seattle, Washington. So you can check out his publications as well on the EMU faculty page. So please welcome Chad up.
It's pretty heavy. All right. Does that work? Okay. Thanks for coming. And my story deals more with the other sense that you wouldn't be able to taste if you couldn't smell, right? So this has to do with smell. And there are some food references too, so you can listen for those. This is a short story, like Mike said, and it's called Making Good. And I'll just start. It has two epigraphs from the book of Genesis. The first one is this: "And Isaac smelled the smell of Jacob's raiment and blessed him." And the second one is also from Genesis: "And the Lord smelled a sweet savor." This takes place in Kentucky, by the way. "This was the mantras in Arno's house. She left me for some guy in Lexington. His father said it to the phone man, the light man, the cable man, and to him. 'Your mama left me for some guy in Lexington,' he'd say, 'and I don't reckon I'll ever see her again.' And if he was feeling particularly sour, he'd add, 'That bitch.'" But Arno Cottle's daddy was a good man, not prone to the bottle or cards like most everyone else in Poor Fork. Sometimes Arno wished Daddy would have lived a little longer than the 29 years that he did. But life's funny that way. You can never tell what will happen, can you? Like Daddy's death, for instance. Drowning in the shallow green Cumberland, a 2-ton steel girder atop his chest, holding him under until his lungs turned to gills. They said he died with his eyes open, said his hands floated as nice as they could be, like he was taking a dip up at Halcombe's Reservoir on a Sunday afternoon. Must have been a nice way to die, all peaceful like that. Arno's grandmother, Grace, who everyone called Mammy, didn't hide her disgust with the road crew's incessant talk of her son's death. "Them boys say stuff a 10-year-old should never have to hear," she told him. It was June, hot, several days after the funeral. Mammy's trim lawn was bright green and smelled like nitrogen fertilizer, not grass. He watched her bend over and pick a lonely dandelion. "It's just wrong," Mammy said, shaking the weed in his face. It was the closest he'd ever seen Mammy to come to crying. Was it the dandelion? No, she was probably still upset about Daddy's death. Arno hadn't told anyone that he never got sad over Daddy's death. He tried several times to make himself cry, like all kids do when their daddies die. The tears didn't come. He bit his lip until it bled. He clipped his thumbnail too close. He stuck a needle in his toe, but no tears appeared. And even when he picked up the flowers from the florist shop that his mama had called in from Lexington, he was more distracted by the irises and lilies than with any sort of sadness. There was something in the smell that provoked him. He brought the bouquet back home to Mammy, who was brushing one of her African violets against her cheek. She grew those, her pets, she called them, in a little greenhouse window above the chipped ceramic kitchen sink. They were the only living creatures that loved her the way she thought she deserved to be loved, unconditionally. Their leaves were dark green and rippled like potato chips. Food. Their flowers blue and soft as her toilet seat cover. Mammy never let him touch her violets, but he didn't care. They didn't smell like much anyway. She was startled to see him come through the door carrying Daddy's grave flowers. "Get those out of here!" She put the violet back in the sun. Arno stood still as a light pole. "You want to bring a curse on this house?" Mammy said. "Look, you don't ever bring a dead man's flowers into your house. Everyone knows that." He took a step toward her and held out the flowers. "Smell them," he said. She cranked her head sideways and back. She said, until the folds in her neck grew taut as the new plastic sofa covers. "Just one little sniff won't kill you," he said. "No." Mammy plucked her nose and breathed through her mouth. Her tongue was big and pink like a cow's, and her dentures weren't there. Out you go, he'll haunt us till death. But ghosts aren't for real. Out! She shooed him away with a flick of her wrist. She took the flowers to Daddy's grave and laid them across the freshly turned dirt. He kept one lily, though. Mammy would never find it under his bed. And later, after the flower dried and began to crumble apart, like an old dusty moth wing, he put it in a jelly jar. It reminded him of the specimens from his science classes. That Arno, they'd say. Something ain't right about him ever since his daddy passed. But he knew better. He knew that he had never been right and probably never would be, and that was fine with him. Being orphaned had the consequence of instilling in him an independent streak, of not caring a whit what others thought about him. He chalked it up to being born in the wrong family. When he turned 17 and bought his first truck, an old red and chrome Ford, he did what was proper and hung a gun rack across the rear window. Mammy found him that evening in her flower bed, picking little pink and white jasmine blossoms and stringing them on a thread. "You're a sight," she said, "out here picking flowers like a girl. They smell like tea." He held out a blossom for her to smell. She sniffed it like it was a dog turd. "It don't smell like Constant Comet to me." "It's green tea," he said, "kissed with jasmine." Mammy took her chin in her leathery hand and took his chin in her leathery hand and sharply crooked his neck so that he was looking at her eyes. "What's wrong with you?" He said that nothing was wrong with him, but she told him that nobody talked like that except maybe the revenue man, and he was never right. She let his face go. Arno sniffed the flowers again. "It's the way advertisers talk." "You like to kill me when you talk like that." "No need for worry, Mammy. Worries me that you'll go off to some college and not come back," she said. "You're better off here." "Yes, ma'am." "They'd change you, and then you'd be about as useful as a knife without a blade." "Yes, ma'am," he said, nodding the end of the string. He held up his strand of flowers. "Now what are you going to do with that?" "Put it on my gun rack," he said. "It'll freshen up my cab a bit." Mammy kicked a little dirt clod from the yard into the flower bed. "Just get yourself a freshener from the Shell station." The jasmine flowers left his truck, smelling fantastic, even after they wilted and sprinkled onto his seat like snow. He liked to compare the cab of his truck to church, kind of like Mammy's church, Poor Fork Holy Church of Jesus, but without the religion, a place you could go to escape the town. He'd sit, his hands on the steering wheel, and his eyes closed, and think, usually about Mama, but sometimes about Daddy too, what it was like being Dad, or what it was like in Lexington, and he'd wonder if he'd ever leave Poor Fork, and what sorts of jobs he would find after school, preferably jobs that would make him lots of money. But mostly he thought about smell, how scents made him remember certain things, how some fragrances were deep while others were flat, how lilacs exploded in his nose and doused him with shots of sugared pollen. But he also wondered what Mammy thought about while sitting in church. He knew she fretted over God, whether he loved her or not, whether she even deserved to be loved, because he could hear her pray some nights after he was in bed, lengthy, fevered prayers, begging the Lord's forgiveness for this or that trifle of a sin. Let her get on a drunk and screw the pastor, he thought. Now that would be a sin worthy of prayer. Arnold couldn't stand to sit in Mammy's church when he was little. The place smelled bad, a combination of furnace soot, mold, and casserole leftovers. In summer, a deathly smell from the cow pond forced its way through the open windows and hung in the still air. The pond, which was covered with so much algae that you could walk across it just like Jesus, was on the other side of the gate next to the church parking lot. Her fire-haired pastor used it for baptisms, which were few, and Arno, his sweaty back stuck to the soft varnish of the pine pews, breathed through his mouth to avoid the smell. In winter, the sanctuary reeked of piss and pine sol. The smell, which originated from the urinals in the men's room, was forced through the heating grates scattered over the sanctuary floor. It was a bad idea to have the furnace in the restroom, Arno thought. What sort of idiot would design a church like that? One Sunday after church, a month or so after his father's death, Arno asked the pastor, Isaac Bailey, a short man who smelled like wood smoke and dried apples, why his church smelled so bad. "I can't smell anything foul, son," he said. Arno wondered if the pastor meant that he was too holy to smell, that somehow having your nose stuck in the Bible inoculated him from all things earthly. Arno told Bailey that he should probably trim his nose hairs if he was having such a rough time smelling. Mammy touched the pastor's shoulder. "Excuse us," she said, and pulled Arno out of the foyer and onto the sidewalk. "That nose of yours is nothing but trouble," she said. "Don't you go being rude to the pastor." "But it stinks in there." I don't smell nothing but your sin. How can you stand it in there? That's the Lord's house you're talking about, Mammy said. He'll make trouble for you if you don't shut your mouth. Well, Jesus should get someone to clean up his place, Arno said. Mammy slapped his face. My Violet's got better manners than you. She left him standing there. Arno wiped the blood from his nose and watched her walk away. Her but a live creature barely contained in the cage of her polyester pants. His blood smelled like staples, and the sun felt like a pitchfork in his eyes. It wasn't always Jasmine in the cab of his truck. Sometimes he tied bundles of pine needles to his rear view mirror, sometimes sweet blooms from Mammy's butterfly bush. There was honeysuckle, which actually did taste like honey. Funny how some things taste like they smell. Dandelion blooms and fragrance samples ripped from issues of Vogue or Vanity Fair he found at the library. Scents by Ralph Lauren, Guess, Estee Lauder, and Chanel. Faggot, his classmates called him, homo. Sometimes there were fresh herbs hanging from his mirror, rosemary and basil in particular, and sometimes bundles of spices like cinnamon sticks, clove, and nutmeg. Sometimes he placed half-burned logs in an ash can on the passenger side floor just for the campfire smell that he loved so much. Sometimes he let vanilla candles melt on his dash. Weird, they said. Roses, tomatoes, and cedar shavings in a brown paper bag. He listened to his nose and ignored their taunts. Not everyone is capable of smelling the lemongrass and Burberry. Maybe he'd have to put his nose to work and make his own perfume. The evening the pastor called Mammy and Arno were putting together a jigsaw puzzle called The Peaceable Kingdom that featured a lion, a lamb, a snake, and a little kid wearing a brilliant white diaper. The picture on the box had them resting under a tree, maybe an oak, Arno wasn't sure, and they all looked drunk. There was also a bridge in the background spanning a frothy white stream. Mammy was maybe 3/4 of the way done with the puzzle when she got her big kitchen scissors from the knife drawer and went to work on the remaining pieces, trimming off the knobs and angles so she could snugly fit them into any place she wanted. Arno tried to explain that that was not how puzzles worked, that was precisely why they were called puzzles, but she snapped the black scissors near his face, catching a few sections of his bangs. His hair flitted onto the table. You can't force it, Mammy, he said. By God, I can, she said. Can't stand it when nothing fits. Arno got the garbage can from under the sink and cleaned the scraps off the table. He watched her finish the puzzle. It looked terrible. You could see the red tablecloth on the kitchen table showing through the gaps in the line, which looked like a hunter got a hold of it, and there were portions of the grassy landscape stuck in the red plank siding of the bridge. Looked like a bunch of drunks that built the bridge, not the quality work Daddy would have done. When the phone rang, Mammy gave him a questioning look. Did he know what that sound was? It's the telephone, he said. Get your hearing checked. She threw the scissors at him, puncturing his palm. That'll learn you for making fun of me. She went to answer the phone. Arno studied his hand and licked his blood. It tasted like nails, but didn't hurt too bad. Mammy came back to the room, dragging the phone with her. She nearly tripped on the cord. It's the pastor, she said, and handed him the phone. The pastor made small talk for a minute, told him it was good to hear his voice. What has he been up to? A jigsaw, Arno told him. The pastor said that puzzles were a good way to learn grace, and then told Arno that he sure got himself a nice-looking truck. And did Arno know that he once had a truck exactly like that? No. Arno thought he was a Chevy man. Then laughter from the pastor, and the real reason for the call. You should come to church again, son. It's been a while. I don't fit in there, Arno said. Bailey told him that coming to church might surprise him. I doubt that, Arno said. You can never be too sure. I think I'm pretty sure, Pastor, he said. Some people just aren't cut out for church. No offense. Well, it's an open invitation, Bailey said. Arno hung up the phone and asked Mammy if she'd put Bailey up to that. Well, heavens no, Mammy said, looking at her finished puzzle. But it'd do you some good to show your face in church once in a while. Folks are always asking about you. He called me son, he said. Mammy suddenly swept the puzzle into the trash can. Because you don't have a daddy, she said. A few weeks after his conversation with the pastor, Arno smelled a goat while he was playing mini golf up at Kingdom Come. The goat stood several yards from him, up a little hill and under a kudzu-covered arbor, and its sour, earthy scent hindered his game. It smelled like feta cheese, not the crumbles from the grocery store, but the fresh stuff the cheese lady sells down at the farm market. Maybe it was her goat. But the distraction wasn't that the goat smelled bad. It was rather that she, and it was a she, he could tell, smelled good. that he found her sharp scent intoxicating. Surely this was sinful. Surely Mammy wouldn't approve. He shouldn't be attracted to goats. She squinted at him with her green eyes and worked its jaw, chewing on something green. Kudzu, probably. He tried to focus on his game. He had 2 tries left to get his ball in the hole for his best ever score, but both shots bounced off the back edge and ended up in a sand trap off the green. He picked up his ball and looked at the goat. "You'll make good," the goat said. She turned and slowly walked away into the woods, leaving wisps of smoke rising from the singed grass where she had stood. Arno dropped his putter. "Holy shit," he said. That evening during dominoes, Mammy asked him what was bothering him. He laid a double 6. "Nothing," he said. She looked at him, her eyes bulged and magnified through her reading glasses. "I can tell you're lying," she said, adding a domino to the train. Her favorite violet, a blue-flowered thing that didn't have an ounce of smell, sat on the table next to her coffee cup because she had read an article in one of her old lady magazines about the benefits of plant and human interaction. Plants need people, and people need plants. The most ridiculous thing he had ever heard. "You ever raise goats?" he asked her. "Filthy creatures," she said, "and about as holy as the devil." "They can't be that bad," he said. "They say they'll eat anything. That's a plus." That's a good-for-nothing trait nowadays, especially when you got that shiny garbage truck coming around once a week to take care of what you throw out. Arno finished his glass of milk. "Besides," she said, "the only goat I ever had was dumb as rocks, always getting her head stuck in a fence in the middle of the night, bleeding up a hell till I came out there and freed her up." Arno asked her what happened to it. "Neighbor shot it dead," she said, stroking her violet. "Did me a favor." "Did you eat it?" she said. "Good God, no," she said. I took her head back to the extension agent who talked me into buying that old nanny and said, "Here's your goat back." The vultures and the ravens took care of the rest. "Maybe it just needed a mother," Arno said. "Now don't go sweet-talking goats," Mammy said, her cheeks flaming up a little, flaming red, and little pearls of saliva collecting in the corners of her mouth. "It says that the Lord will separate the sheep from the goats, and the sheep he'll take with him to heaven, and the goats won't get nothing but eternal damnation." She paused, adjusted her glasses, laid a 6-0, an eternal barbecue. He stared at her upright dominoes, standing sentry in front of her shiny hands. He attached a 0-1 to her line. "Holy Jesus," she said, "we laid the mark of the beast." Mammy's hands burst out through her line of dominoes and mixed up the sprawling line, knocking over his empty glass. "They're just numbers," he said. "If Jesus put them numbers in Revelations, then they mean something." Her lazy eye drifted rightward, Arno's bellwether for imminent anger. "If you don't believe me, just ask the pastor." "You can't believe everything you hear." He realigned his dominoes, but Mammy pushed her hand across the table, and the dominoes fell from the table like coal from a ripe seam. "You've got to believe something," she said, exasperated. "Make your choice, God or devil." She carried her glaring violet back into the kitchen, and Arno gathered the dominoes and tucked them into their box. "You'll make good," he said. I think I'll stop there.
Thank you, Chad. Our next reader is Elizabeth Hoover, who is a writer who enjoys working on projects that have a conceptual or research element. Her current project, The Enterprise of Seeing, offers art as a space for resistance to and transformation of dominant gender narratives. This hybrid text uses diverse sources, including pop culture, art history, and aesthetic theory to explore issues related to sexual violence. A portion of that project was awarded Story Quarterly's Essay Prize, judged by Maggie Nelson. And her poetry has appeared in Pank, the Los Angeles Review, and The Pinch, among others. She is the assistant director of JMuse Furious Flower Poetry Center and edits their online magazine, The Fight and the Fiddle. So please welcome Elizabeth up here.
Stand upright.
All right. I'll let you, is that good?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Is that? Hello. Thank you, Michael, for inviting me. Those are 3 really tough acts to follow, so I'm a little intimidated. But As Michael mentioned, I do write about sexual violence, so there will be references to that. And if that's something you feel like you're not able to stay for, you should feel free to take a break. We each read for about 15 minutes, so if you need to step out, I totally understand. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from an essay called Smudge, a piece of flash fiction, and a poem, so hold on to your butts. It's an excerpt of an essay that took place while I was in graduate school. While I was in graduate school, I was studying creative writing, and I was sexually assaulted. And after that, I started writing poetry based on the photography of Saul Leiter. So you'll hear Leiter's name. And I think that's all you need to know. Oh, I met the person who assaulted me at a roof party. Smudge. I'm a good student. I feel awkward. I'm not comfortable. Okay, there we go. Okay, that's better. I am a good student. Once I was a student of the poet L.B., who writes, or at least used to, long poems in the voices of historical figures. I wanted to write long poems in the voices of historical figures, so I went to graduate school to study with him. I wrote neat margin notes all down the right side of my classmates' poems. Our classroom had tables in 2 arcs bolted to the floor, so we sat in rows facing him. The windowless room had a clock that ticked loudly but moved erratically, so we entered a timeless stupor as he rifled through his bag stuffed with papers or drew inscrutable diagrams on the board. We rarely got to everyone who was supposed to be workshopped because LB often began class by reading the newspaper to us. I would, good student that I am, take notes on the op-ed pieces he read. One day we were discussing a poem that seemed to me to be about the inability to write a poem about grief. During discussion, the idea occurred to me that the poem enacted that failure in its form. The discovery felt like a little sugar on the tip of my tongue. This is a failed poem, I begin. Who are you to say a poem is failed? LB demands. My voice stops in my throat, a little choke. I start again, flailing toward what I want to say about the magnificence of failure, but he cut me off. Don't you think this poem deserves a better reader? Thus began LB's near constant interruptions, always in the middle of 2 thoughts, so my ideas seemed mangy and cowering. It made me ashamed of my voice and idea. It made me wonder if I had any sense at all. One day during class break, I ran into Sarah in the women's room. She worked at the university and audited our workshops. In the bathroom's fluorescent light, the blonde hair on her cheeks stood out like fur against her tan. What's up with you two? She asks, yanking an astonishing number of paper towels from the dispenser. I don't know, I guess he really doesn't like me. Oh, I thought you were sleeping together. He treats you like you're lovers, or he's your dad. I stopped speaking in workshop. Instead, I marched my little margin notes all the way down the page and onto the back, where they grew into blocks of text. During class, I wrote down everything that was said to keep busy and quiet. At the time, I was bringing into workshop dramatic monologues in the voices of lynch mob members. I would spend the afternoons in the law library reading books about frontier justice and gathering historical facts. One day, we were passing around our poems and LB groaned. Another? He held up mine. You aren't allowed to bring in any more of these, he said. Why don't you write about your childhood? he asked, making me feel like a steak slapped on a bruise. Telling this story, I worry if I am being clearer, if I sound as if I'm making things up. What I fear the most is that someone will call me crazy. But the steak was female, and so too the bruise. To LB, I was both, steak and bruise, stinking and spreading. His exasperating task, keep me contained. LB asked to see me in his office. He offers me a low armchair that refuses to allow me to sit up straight, then shuts the door. The latch cracks against my windpipe. I've been thinking of you all summer, he murmurs as he sits in his desk chair, palms cradling the back of his head. I open my notebook and pretend to look for a blank page. You're one of the best poets I've ever worked with. He leans further back, a silhouette against the window. I know I gave you a hard time. I was just trying to make you a more nimble thinker. If he had leaned forward and touched my knee, if he had leaned forward and grabbed my thigh, if he had leaned forward and pressed me against the bookshelf, I would have known how to react. It would have been familiar, pedestrian, boring even. But he leans further back into the window, curtained by golden leaves, and talks about the importance of vulnerability as something I can discover through my writing. I want to tell him vulnerability runs ahead of me like a dog straining at a leash, that it is the first thing a man sees, that its bark and froth blur me into a figure without individual detail. Instead, I listen while LB talks. I sit very still, crunched in my spine, and take careful notes while ribbons of flesh spool off my person. Whether LB says I am best or I am boring doesn't matter, because neither contain information, and I am something different than both. Once you were a pretty girl at a Ruth party. Once you were a scholarly poet writing about the nature of historical violence in unbending hexameter. Now you are someone who watches a lot of television. You eat boxes of vegetarian chicken nuggets while watching marathons of cop shows or shows about serial killers. Most of the serial killers are sexual sadists who torture women in ways that cause the FBI agents to pinch their handsome faces and make heroic choices that run counter to procedural rules but are ultimately rewarded. They rarely arrest the killer. Instead, there is a standoff with a gun to a woman's head. The FBI agents try to talk the killer into putting the gun down, but a sniper or a rookie agent who doesn't know if he has what it takes shoots the killer in the head. The woman screams and is whisked into an ambulance, where a pretty agent rubs her shoulder and tells her it's all over. You mix mayonnaise with barbecue sauce, dribbling the pink mixture on your bathrobe. If you could see yourself, you'd be ashamed. But you are already ashamed, and all you can see is that pretty agent stroking memory clean. Sometimes you go up to the screen and press your face against her pixelated hand. One day I tell Sarah what happened. We'd gone to McAllister's in the strip mall. It was packed post-church with white families, their wiggling children in tiny bow ties or crinoline dresses. She keeps saying, "Oh my God," and I don't know what to say, keeps looking around to make sure no one overheard as her gluey soup threatens to soak through and collapse her bread bowl. Meanwhile, I dismantle my sandwich, trying to excavate the promise I read on the menu. "What did you do?" she asks. "What did the police say?" "I didn't go to the police. Why would I go to the police?" I ask, exploring a destitute pickle. "For justice." The word sits on the table like some obscurely shaped archaeological object of obscure use. I can't help but laugh. I laugh so hard she thinks I'm having a nervous breakdown and calls my mother. Now I live with my mother. My mother is concerned with my sleeplessness and purchased nut brown curtains to block out the light. I lie in the dark as the day passes. Sometimes I get up and flip through Leiter's catalog. Sometimes I read and little bits stick in my throat like hunks of meat. One such bit is an Anne Carson poem about wolves who die from anger. Once I was a wolf, gnawing at my leg in a trap, but all leg. Now I spend the morning in bed, rummaging around the refrigerator in the late afternoon, eat only crunchy food. My mother and I eat dinner in the yard or while watching musicals on television. Cop shows are strictly forbidden. It helps that when I tell her what Sarah said about justice, she gets the joke. It has been 6 months of iceberg lettuce and my fair lady. Sarah says, Sarah says that she thinks I should try dating again, even if just to get out of the house. She even has someone in mind, a tall poet I meet for coffee one afternoon. He explains to me that poetry is a means to excavate the inner life. He tells me he wants to get at deeper truths. Once I saw a painting by Anthony Gormley called Mansion. It's of a man with his arms out, and in his pelvis dangles another, smaller man. The little man has strings that connect him to the bigger man, part to part. So strings from the little man's hands go up to the bigger man's chest, then down his armpits to attach to the big man's fingers. Even their claw-like penises are connected with strings split like a trident. What I like about Leiter's photos is that they present things as themselves. No little bus lurking inside a big bus. Nothing waiting to be excavated. I am not sure I have a little me dangling inside a big me. Then again, I know what it's like to be a steak, and a steak is just a steak. Then I was just an ear listening at the door. A woman transformed into a giant, meaty ear, listening for footsteps, listening for the signal that it will soon be over, listening to a man tell her what poetry is, and poetry is already all she has. As my date explains to me the rigors of solitude and the need for an inward gaze, his voice turns me into a meat ear, and I revel in it. I look out from my meat eyes, under meat eyelashes, dripping meat juice, and my tongue is a scrap kicked down a grate. Nothing to excavate here, just meat and ear. As meat, you know what to expect. As meat, you are never surprised. That's me, meat and ear and sloppy nerves and a restless eye attached to a collector brain, and at my center is a mouth forming, almost ready to say unspeakable things. So that's the end of the essay. You can clap and make me feel better. So this is not violent. It's called Hearts of Palm Canned. I listen to NPR a lot, and that's a statement I just made. All right, Hearts of Palm. Her entire life searching for the elusive sea unicorn or narwhal. The radio ribbons into my sleep, a series about a marine biologist. She is explaining narwhal mating habits when the radio clicks off. By the time I get up and turn it back on, they are talking about foreclosure rates. Entire cities empty. I look up narwhal on the internet, a white creature with a wide grin and spiraled tooth. The next morning, the nets bounce, She struggles into her survival suit. What do narwhals sound like? Like seals or dolphins? Or do they glide silently, communicating with smells and signs? The scientist sounds young. She laughs a lot. She laughs about the nets and about not catching anything. She laughs when the reporter asks if she's read Moby Dick. The radio clicks off before she answers. When I turn it back on, houses bereft of their owners weep vinyl siding and fling shingles to the ground. At work, I think of the Arctic and the woman struggling into her suit because she hears the narwhals cry. Or is it the iceberg starting to crack? I drag numbers from a spreadsheet into another spreadsheet. After work, I squint at my list in the tundra of the grocery store. Hearts of palm. I can't remember writing that or what hearts of palm are. At home, I open the can and find salty chunks of white flesh. The scientist wanted to be a dancer. One day, she lifted into an arabesque and heard her ankle crunch like a walnut and knew. What did you know? The radio clicks off and houses sprout kudzu and cut flour. I click to a spreadsheet so my boss won't catch me reading about narwhal songs. The scientist uses a spear to stab a transmitter into a narwhal's flank, trying to find out where they go in winter. Do they dive into the deep to hibernate or follow warmer currents south? I know where I go in winter. I go to work. I go to the grocery store. I go home with my canned goods. I dive shallower and shallower, no matter the season. I arrange the hearts of palm on a plate, and she eats them with her hands, sucks brines off her fingers. She laughs about Moby Dick and the crush of her tiny bones. Why don't you just ask them? But the chair doesn't reply. I go to bed early to pass time before the next broadcast. The transmitter slips from the wound. It relays the current, which sounds like a lung. I listen to pebbles grinding, her laughing, and sharpening her spear. I enter narwhal gestation periods into a spreadsheet. On Saturday, the radio is hysterical. I listen to markets shatter like china, but the scientist doesn't come on. On Sunday, the radio weeps for an assassinated world leader and rides the bus to see how commuters are dealing with the recession. On Monday, it's Korean Little League and executive suicides. On Thursday, I am out of sick days, and the radio hobbles through the wreckage of an exploded mall. I fill my trunk with canned hearts, head north. So I have a short little poem. It's called Resurrection After Hours, and it's based on a sculpture by Felix Gonzalez Torres called Untitled, Portrait of Ross in LA. Every night, as per the artist's instructions, workers replenish the pile of candy in the corner of the gallery. Bring the multicolored sparkle back to 175 pounds. His lover's weight when healthy. We all remove something a little sweet, a little lime, a little raspberry. I imagine he called his lover Sugar, which sounds matronly and affected coming from my mouth. I call you baby, and your unallegorical body taste of salt, a little sour. But if I lost you, I too would make my grief a public carnival. Ask strangers to help take you away in silver crinkles, revealing a sweetness so impossible it must be manufactured. Turn my love into bright primaries children run to, shrieking candy, candy. Thanks so much.
All right. So our next reader here, or speaker here, I would say is in part the inspiration for this year's programming for the cafe. We decided to do programming on food, and that was a result of an event we did last semester. Professor Alan Levinovitz presented on his book, The Gluten Lie. And so let me introduce him. He's an assistant professor here at Chinese religion, of Chinese religion, and the author of The Gluten Lie and Other Myths About What You Eat. His writing and journalism have appeared in Wired, The Atlantic, Slate, Salon, The Believer, and elsewhere. Currently, he is working on the connection between astrology and the macroeconomic models. I should say too, Alan also just recently received JMuse College of Arts and Letters School of Liberal Arts Alumni Legacy Award, which honors exceptional teaching and scholarship faculty here, so I want to congratulate him. His one food taboo is fake cheese. Please welcome up Alan.
Am I the first person to sit in a chair? I'm going to do it.
You need to pull that closer, or are you all right?
I think people will be able to hear me. So I think it was Erica that mentioned epistolaries. So this is an epistle. This is a letter, and it's called "Because I Did Not See You Suffering," and it's about what I've learned after writing this book, The Gluten Lie, and talking to people about it. So, this letter is for all the people I have hurt. Since I can't erase your pain, I hope I can pay part of my debt to you with honesty. And if I'm to be honest with you, to be honest with myself, then I have to admit I've been disguising my motives. My book and my articles about diets and food are written as if they are concerned only with finding out and preaching the truth. The scientific truth about gluten, fat, salt, and sugar. The historical truth about how we came to fear these foods. The socio-cultural truth about the way in which food has, for many, become a secular ritual that guarantees, like religion, one's salvation or damnation. And my book is about these things. But I'm ashamed to admit that it pretends to care about the people who fear and avoid these foods. I really did want to help people break free from falsehoods, to liberate them and allow them to enjoy food without taboos, without sitting down to meals and performing a cost-benefit analysis of every item on their plate. But in the months after publishing my book, I came to realize that I also wanted to prove you, the people for whom dietary taboos have been beneficial, I wanted to prove you all wrong. Like some kind of anti-evangelist, I wanted to strip away the rituals that comfort you, that have brought you solace, that healed you. I wanted to make you doubt, to humiliate you, to show you that only gullible fools could fall for the parlor tricks and miracle promises peddled by health gurus. You may be asking yourself how I could have thought that. It's simple. I was suffering from a terrible case of narcissism, from which I am only now beginning to recover. I have not struggled with chronic irritable bowel syndrome, or psoriasis, or aching joints. I have not been to doctor after doctor after doctor only to have my symptoms dismissed and ignored, or to have them prescribe the same medication that had already been prescribed to me 3 doctors ago. And like any narcissist, I did not see you suffering because I have not suffered. And so I did not understand why you might seek out alternative forms of healing, rituals with which to control uncontrollable pain, to assert some sense of control over a body which refuses to behave, and for which misbehavior medical authorities can offer nothing. And then, of course, there's the fact that personal suffering is nothing compared to the suffering of a loved one, a friend, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a child. I have never been told that there is nothing to be done about the cancer or the learning disability. I have never watched as someone I love turns into someone else before my eyes. In situations like these, taking seriously the promise of hope is not a sign of intellectual weakness. And yet that has been the subtext of my writing. The offensive sneer that snakes through what appeared to be historical facts and reports on the results of double-blinded, placebo-controlled trials. I, a professor of religious studies, I walked through your temple and laughed at your rituals. Rituals that you came to from a place of suffering and that may have lifted you through physiological or psychological or spiritual means, if those can even be separated, that may have lifted you out of suffering and fear and insecurity to a place of hope and peace. I did my very best to destroy your beliefs, pretending the whole time that I was doing it for your own good, without really taking a moment to think about what your good might be. Here is something else that narcissists do. They see everyone who disagrees with them as a single undifferentiated mass, and they speak to that mass as if it were an individual. They cannot be bothered to really listen. This is why I said my book was about preaching the truth, not sharing it. You share with people, but you preach at people, and without actually listening, it was impossible for me to share with you. As a consequence, many of you, rightfully, did not want to hear what I had to say. Who wants to hear the shouting and ranting of someone interested only in being heard and in tearing down those who disagree with him? And instead of blaming my own shortcomings for this communication failure, I did what any good narcissist would do and blame the world. All right, so here I am, and thanks to coincidence or grace, or whatever you want to call it, there were people who weren't harmed by what I wrote. People who I actually helped by accident, but hey, whatever. And they reached out to me and told me about how I helped them. And through them, I learned that helping people is way, way better than tearing people down. So if I could do it again, then I'd talk about food and diet truths with the genuine intention of relieving suffering, which, because I did not see it, I never really took seriously. It turns out there are people who suffer from the endless headlines that say foods will kill you. There are people who suffer from hearing that obesity is an affliction and the bodies they live in are curses on themselves and their country. There are people who just want to feed their children without fearing that the foods they provide might be poison. There are people, in other words, whose suffering comes from the fact that we live in a world in which food has been cursed itself. And it is impossible to eat a meal without thinking, oh no, the steak is clogging my arteries and destroying the environment, so that's bad. But it comes from a local farm, so that's good. And I'm eating broccoli with it, so that's good too. But the broccoli has salt and oil on it, so that's bad. And I'm drinking my second glass of wine, that's probably bad. But it's red wine, so that's probably good. So it turns out that without knowing it, I care about you. And my letter is meant for you as well, because I did not see your suffering either. And so I didn't even think of speaking to you at all. I didn't think that in addition to producing an argument that's true, which, to be fair, is what academics are trained to care about professionally, I could write something useful. And I'm sorry that the road to hell is paved not only with good intentions, but also with self-righteous truth-telling. And I guess I owe something of an apology to those of you who are listening to me read this letter, sorry, who may not be a part of either camp, neither suffering health problems nor suffering food neuroses, and may be thinking to yourselves that the real proof of narcissism is getting invited to a reading that's supposed to be about food and then spending the whole time talking about how sorry you are. So for all of you, I'm going to just make the points I've been making in my book and in my writing, but hopefully from a different place now, with a different tone of voice, hoping for dialogue and not conversion. So I think that restrictive diets are medical interventions, whether they are gluten-free, low-calorie, low-fat, or low-salt. Like any medical intervention, these diets have potential side effects, whether they lead to a life of yo-yo dieting, or increasing your food neuroses, or the inability to enjoy a meal with family and friends, because the food that is being served might be unclean. I think that culinary culture should be much, much more than an attempt to optimize our health, live as long as possible, and I see in our modern eating habits a kind of new Puritanism in which the repression of sexual pleasure has been swapped for the repression of culinary delight. I also recognize that imprudent eating, like imprudent sexual activity, can have serious, devastating consequences. I know that many people consume too much sugar and too many convenience foods, and that for them, hyperbole around the dangers of food is a blessing, not a curse, and helps them to make good on changes in their eating habits that can save their lives. I guess this is all to say that I recognize people are suffering, and that the solution to their suffering may itself cause suffering. Food is a problem, a joy, a ritual, a necessity, and from now on, I will dedicate myself to making sure that the ritual is joyous and the necessity is not oppressive. And I apologize for not doing so earlier.
Thank you. Our next speaker, our last speaker, is Paul Summers. He's a poet, photographer, filmmaker, and curator living in Harrisonburg, Virginia, with his partner and 3 children, 2 of which are here. He has written 2 books of poetry, Animal Insight and Barply. He is currently working on a chapbook titled Fight Songs. His current bodies of photographic work include Documented, an exploration of white perceptual inconsistencies regarding Latino people, and Old Broken Men, a perspective on older men who lead responsible lives yet are very childish in nature and ride skateboards. He contributes photography to Bombproof, an ongoing collaboration with the Richmond artist Andre Schenk. He is the founder and curator of Skate and Worshippers, an annual art show dedicated to the aesthetics of skateboarding, and is the co-founder of Super Great Film Festival, an annual film festival that is comprised solely of films made on Super 8 format, which, by the way, this year will be next week, starting next Wednesday and Thursday. Check that out at Court Square Theater. Board member of the Arts Council of the Valley, he also serves as co-director of the Wine Rider and Pegasus Galleries at Larkin Arts, downtown. Finally, he is also owner of the Golden Pony, a restaurant and bar with a music venue featuring live music, poetry readings, and other culturally honored events. So please welcome Paul Summers up to the mic.
Everybody.
Hello.
My name is Paul Summers. My first poem is about my gluten allergy. And it's called How Dare You. No, yeah, that's not real. My interest in this reading is just with what food can do as far as bringing people together. And certainly food is something that I work with every day and have for some time, and things that I notice about food that are different from everything else, it's very difficult to accept another culture's philosophy or their system of mathematics or their thinking on this topic or that topic, but it's very easy to accept their food. And when I was growing up, the place that we would go when we were celebrating a birthday or something like that, for some reason, was always this Mexican restaurant. And so I've always kind of associated foreign foods with luxury. And so my first poem kind of deals a little bit with that. Before the Golden Pony was a thing, I was the bar manager at the Blue Nile, which was an Ethiopian restaurant that closed just a little over a year ago. And I worked for the Arafani family, and they came here from Ethiopia and had all sorts of amazing stories to tell about that whole process and everything about coming from Ethiopia and fighting and living through the Civil War, and things that we can't possibly imagine. But so yeah, I'll start this poem. It's called Translations, and it has 4 parts. And I wrote this for Lucy, who was a human ancestor that lived about 3 million years ago and was found in Ethiopia. And if you don't know much about Ethiopia, it's very interesting to research because there's so many amazing things about it. And this touches on just like a couple. And so I wrote this when I was working there still. 1. I manage a bar in an Ethiopian restaurant where most of the customers are not Ethiopian and are into metal or punk. Occasionally the Ethiopian band comes in and plays music, but only on Ethiopian New Year's. Anyway, recently I was able to find an Ethiopian beer called Harar and order it in bulk so that we could finally have an actual Ethiopian beer on the menu. It's okay. The owner, a survivor of the Ethiopian Civil War, came up to the bar the other night and said, "Give me a Harar beer." And I said, "It's actually pronounced Harar." 2. The archaeologist's exhumation of Egyptian pharaohs or Ethiopian kings is a translation of an ancient existence into the tongues of European mouths and their books of misunderstandings, but what man or myth was by thousands of years beyond death, still standing or speaking with eloquent tongue. Of the journey of his heart with blood pouring out from its doldrums, Jesus Christ, did you know Ethiopia has the longest standing Christian tradition in the world? 3. My Ethiopian friend also tends bar, but not with me. We decided I'm the best white bartender working at an Ethiopian bar, and he's the best Ethiopian bartender working at a white bar. He showed me a picture of his great-grandfather, and it looked just like him, except my friend's head is still attached to his body, and fascist Italians are not posing with it for a picture. 500,000 Ethiopians were killed by the Italians, he said. Murder often goes untranslated. 4. Alexander Pushkin translated Ethiopian into the dawn of Russian literature. It is rumored that when asked by an old woman in the streets of some small Russian village if he translated, he is famed to have said, "Who isn't translating?" It sounds like a drunk history. Oh, I'm sorry. He went further saying, "We're all just making this shit up, right?" He went further saying, God, it sounds like a drunk history, but it is true. Pushkin was Ethiopian, or a quarter at least. When I found out, I immediately went to tell my boss the good news. He smiled the whole time I was telling him. He said, sure. They have statues of him in Ethiopia. Go ahead and look it up. Pictures of Pushkin. You look at it and it's like, whoa, he is totally black. His African features are incredibly blatant, but don't say it out loud or people might think you're a racist, and racist fans of Russian literature will call you a liar. Which reminds me of that. All translation is kind of that, just a lie. And my next poem is... shift around a little bit, but... other things that are interesting when it comes to food is the separation that we have from the living creature to the thing. I mean, obviously we have chickens and then we have chicken nuggets, and one does not resemble the other much at all, and that's always of interest to me. And I'm a chicken person. I like chicken on the bone. I think it's more delicious that way. But you see over and over that it's rarely presented that way, and if it is, it's certainly not in any sort of fine dining situation or any kind of like nice restaurant. But there was a story that I wanted to tell that was that's just always intrigued me, that a friend of mine named Shelby Stevenson, he's the poet laureate of North Carolina, and he was a professor of mine when I was in graduate school at UNC Pembroke. And he grew up on a dirt farm, and you know, they lived off the land and raised hogs and things like that. And his relationship to animals was so different than mine, growing up in apartments and things like that. And he told me this story one time that was just, I mean, it's horrific, really. And that's kind of what happens when we have things like chicken nuggets, is we lose the horror of the killing. And I'm not sure that that's something that we should be losing. I almost feel like we should be forced through this. If you're gonna have the gall to eat something, you should also have to kind of be forced to experience some of the horror of that animal no longer existing and dying. And so Shelby experienced that all the time when they would everybody would get together and slaughter the hogs in the early part of the winter. But this story is about a goat, and they had a goat given to them. It was a billy goat. They named it Billy, and they lived in a plank house, which is in the coastal plain of North Carolina, where Shelby's from. They're pretty much built on top of kind of rock stacks in the corner of each part of the house, and then in the middle, it looks very like shaky, like the house could just fall over, but they don't. And the point is, though, that it's lifted in case floods come. And so in the middle of the night, Shelby would go out to use the bathroom, and he wouldn't go to the outhouse, he would just pee off the porch. And the billy goat would just ram him right in the butt and knock him off the porch, and everybody that went out there to do that. And so they were trying to think of a way to just calm this goat down. And so the neighbor came over and had his own idea, and Shelby's brother was very squeamish, and so he didn't want any part of what was going on, but Shelby had to hold one leg of the animal, and his father held the other leg, while the neighbor, with a straight razor, removed his testicles. And while he was doing that, Shelby's brother, who was very squeamish, you know, his father forcing him to be out there for this, is playing banjo, facing the opposite direction, and just, you know, trying to get out of this situation that his father is kind of forcing upon him. And it's just, I mean, another world for me, and I'm sure a lot of you, and I thought that was an interesting story to tell, and a segue into a poem that references Hemingway's Old Man in the Sea, which, you know, the prize of this fish is not just because it's a huge fish and you can go around telling everybody you caught a huge fish, but it's actually food as well. And that's something that, you know, I don't often think about, and again, you know, with the way that people pursue catching and killing animals now, it's like, you know, getting pictures with this huge deer, and, you know, and then it's like, well, what do we do with the body? Just throw it in the canyon, you know, throw it off on the side of the road as you're leaving, and you see these carcasses and stuff on the sides of the road. But this poem is called Fishbone Poem. Walking the hall with Hemingway on my mind, because I can't force myself to like reading about an old man on a timeless sea catching a giant fish, and I'm crafting my excuse for Mrs. Hanger in my mind already, when I'm interrupted by Christina Harbor walking by me. And boy, do I just want to catch her at that moment, when all her books fall and I help her pick them all up, and she thanks me before walking away. Then I notice a blank sheet of paper she's left behind and doesn't need, but I run after her to give it back anyway. And so she writes her number on it and says to call her, and there is her name with little circles for dots on eyes. So I call her later, and her dad's cool to me and says, sure, he'll get Christina for me. And we talk, and she giggles. And it's hard to understand her thick Georgia accent, but who cares when I can just say, uh-huh, 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 over and over and over until I'm falling asleep on her and waking up to, hey, Paul, did you fall asleep again? And I think, you're talking to Christina Harbor. Wake up, dude. And I do, and she laughs at all my jokes because they're really funny. And then slowly she stops laughing and, becoming serious, asks me to meet her at the school playground. And I say, yeah, for sure. And I'm on my skateboard already. We don't even say bye. And already I'm thinking, I will marry this girl. And then she's there, and I just go up to her and we kiss, and she wants me to hold her because she's scared or likes me or loves me or is going to be my wife someday, and this is how it will always be. But then the bell rings, and instead of writing my response to reading Hemingway, I want to write a poem about how Christina Harbor is like some giant fish in the timeless sea of middle school, and my holy skate shoes are like some ragged little boat that carries me to exactly what I want, as it is devoured in front of me by a ringing bell that sounds like shark's teeth look. And what I pull out of the water is not Christina Harbor, the most beautiful Filipino fish to ever live, but instead it's this little poem on a piece of paper I found in the hall. The lines of it like the ribs on a fish skeleton that's been picked clean by how poor my family is, how scared I am of talking to girls, how lame my clothes are, how uncool I feel, how hungry I am, And these things are sharks. And the ringing bell is a damn shark that wakes me from my dreams of a life with Christina Harbor, who has the perfect name for my fishbone poem. And I, beginning again, dream of our children, thank you, playing on a beach. But I wake up, yes, again, to the vicious Duke dog whose mouth I could just put my head in, just to count the teeth in the Duke dog's belly, without thinking of making Christina Harbor one of those cool necklaces out of any of them. I would just count them to know and feel fascinated, not with her, but with why sharks end up swallowing all their old teeth. Thank you. That's pretty hilarious. And I just have one other poem. I worked on a collection of poems called Bar Ply, and after working in bars and restaurants for 16 years, you know, you see a lot of things and hear a lot of voices and, you know, just people that drink, do, and say crazy things. And Derek here can attest to that. We used to work together. And so this might be a familiar kind of scene for you. But basically, another bartender friend of mine and I, he's an artist and illustrator, got together and, you know, we had this idea of me writing these poems that kind of come out of our experience working behind bars, and he would illustrate them. And so that's exactly what we did, and it was a lot of fun. And so this is just one of the poems. It's called Old Man Blues. I say bells are whistles, but with shoes on their knees. I think too much of what others think of me. And so I say, what if I'm old? I've breathed this long. No reason to stop it now. So what if I'm fat? I like to eat. Call me names if you will, you fucking bastard, you fucking turkey. No one visits me. And but for this whiskey and plate of eggs, I'd be completely destitute. Am I to smoke here? Smile broadly, Mother used to say. Well, fuck you too, Mummy. I'm grown old, and I no longer care to do such things for the sake of doing such things. Those girls down there, down the bar down there, they are laughing. They are laughing at me. They think I'm funny, you know. Yet I find myself drowning by the sound of their cackling and awful voices. Keep quiet down there, do you hear? And do you hear? Young ladies, I'm trying to eat. But of course now I've gone on so long, my eggs have grown cold. And I want to say thanks to Mike Trocchia, who's making a film for Super Great Film Festival this year. So you should come and check it out. It's being screened on the Black and White night, which is Wednesday. And also wanted to say we have poetry readings once a month at the Golden Pony, and the next one is coming up on the 23rd and has musicians paired with poets kind of collaborating and experimenting on the stage. So it should be good if you're interested.
Thank you everyone for coming out. Get back safe. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.